Living in the moment and being present is talked about a lot these days as an important skill for reducing stress and anxiety and promoting overall well-being. But actually putting that into practice in our daily lives can be incredibly challenging. I want to talk about some of the main reasons why living fully in the present moment seems to be so elusive and difficult for most people. Mind caught up in thoughts. One of the biggest barriers to living in the moment is that our mind tends to be constantly caught up in thoughts worrying about the future or ruminating about the past. Our default mode is to have our attention drifting here and there, planning out things we need to do later, thinking back to conversations we had earlier. This constant mental chatter makes it extremely difficult to anchor ourselves fully in the present. Even when we consciously try to focus on what we're sensing or doing right now, within a few seconds we might find our mind already wandering and lost in some train of thought about something else. This tendency of the mind to get continually caught up in thoughts and memories makes living fully in the now a real challenge. Distractions and tech demand attention. Another huge reason living in the moment is so tough is that we live with constant distractions and tech vying for our attention. Our devices are constantly buzzing and beeping, alerting us about the next thing we could pay attention to. Emails coming in, text messages popping up, notifications lighting up our screens. Even when we try to put our devices away and be present, there's environmental stimuli like background noise or conversations happening around us that can pull our focus out of the moment. With so many things demanding our attention all at once in today's world, it takes real intentionality not to get fractured and overwhelmed. Our technology-rich environment makes single tasking incredibly difficult. This makes being anchored in the present moment a rarity for most people rather than the norm. Built-up mental habits. On top of our natural mental tendencies to have an overactive thinking mind and the prevalence of distractions in our environment, most of us have also built up very strong mental habits over the years that reinforce living on autopilot. Habits like constantly checking our phones, browsing social media, or watching videos whenever there's a spare moment. Habits that keep our minds occupied and stimulated, but also keep us from being content just spending time with ourselves and our thoughts. These habits have wired our brains to crave constant entertainment and input. So even when we genuinely want to practice being present, we've already conditioned ourselves to feel bored, restless or anxious when faced with spending a few minutes with nothing in particular to occupy our minds. It becomes extremely challenging not to automatically reach for our devices or default back into our thoughts. These habitual patterns are hard to break out of. Fear of discomfort. Piggybacking on that point, I think many people also avoid living fully in the moment because spending too much time with ourselves in the present often surfaces discomfort. Whether it's emotional pain, regret over past actions, dissatisfaction with life or even just plain boredom, when we stop running on autopilot and distracting ourselves, we open the door for unpleasant feelings or realizations about our circumstances to arise. Many of us intuitively learn that keeping our minds occupied is a good way not to feel that discomfort, so we fill up our mental space watching shows, browsing content and making plans. Of course, in the process we miss out on the depth, richness and beauty that time spent mindfully in the present can offer. But that fear of emotional discomfort is a significant underlying driver keeping people from practicing true presence. Requires practice. Beyond our natural mental tendencies and the modern environment of distraction we live in, I think there's also a misconception that being present is easy, that we should just inherently know how to anchor ourselves in the moment. But in reality, living intentionally in the now is a skill that for most of us requires ongoing nurturing and practice to develop. Much like learning to meditate takes training the mind, learning to be truly present, awake and engaged with what is happening right here and now takes repetition and discipline before it becomes second nature. When most of us have spent decades allowing our minds to run on autopilot and operate from habitual patterns, stemmed from thought, memory or distraction, it takes real conscious effort to retrain ourselves into the skill of living fully immersed in the present. The more intentional practice we put into activities like mindful breathing, paying attention to our senses, catching our minds from wandering and continually recentering in the moment, the more natural presence will become. But it won't happen overnight and does require a commitment to practicing. Conclusion. So in summary, even though so much research points to the fact that living in the present has huge benefits for our well-being, helping us better manage stress, increase life satisfaction, and experience more joy, doing so consistently is extremely difficult for most people. Our wired-in mental tendencies combined with the distractions of modern life and the conditioning of our habitual patterns create very real barriers to being able to anchor ourselves in the moment. It takes knowledge of these challenges and then intentionally practicing skills like mindfulness to retrain our minds towards presence. The better we understand why living fully in the now is hard and where the obstacles lie, the better we can develop strategies for overcoming them. I hope this gives you a helpful framework for why you also probably struggle at times. Stay focused on and engaged with the present. Know that you're not alone, and with the right mindset shift and commitment to practicing presence, you absolutely can train your mind to live more often in the moment. Implementing even small daily changes to be more anchored in what is happening right here and now can add up to dramatically improved wellness and life satisfaction over time.